As Tom said, I'm the mother of 3, and in fact Tom is my eldest child and he's the dyslexic, and he's the reason that I do what I do. So as he said, I founded Dyslexia Answered 11 years ago in Crow's Nest as a result of Tom's remediation that we found that worked, and I've also developed the online courses that I'm launching here. I'm also the author of an up-and-coming book, and there's the 3 kids and my husband Stephen. That was when we were on a holiday a few years ago in Coffs Harbour, where we went on joyrides. So there's Tom, my eldest daughter Michaela, me, and the youngest daughter Tina. Now, I'm going to start off by saying, statistically, 10% of the population are dyslexic. So when we think about that, we think, that's a conservative estimate actually, because in America they feel that it's even higher. They feel that it may be 20% of the population being dyslexic. Dyslexia is genetic. It runs in families. There is no cure because there is nothing wrong. It is just a different way of processing information. Dyslexia is not related to intelligence. A lot of people think that dyslexic people are not intelligent. Well, that's not the case. Quite often they have average or above average intelligence. So dyslexia and intelligence are in fact not related. And dyslexia, well, I guess what is it is probably the most popular question I got. In fact, when I came in downstairs, Rex at the desk there said, "What's dyslexia?" Well, dyslexia is a learning difficulty that affects reading, writing and spelling. That's the simplest way of defining it, because there's no agreed definition for what dyslexia is. And in fact, dyslexia is not recognised in Australia. So, in Port Macquarie, there are 5,000 primary school children. Potentially, there are 500 dyslexic school children. And if we have a look at these NAPLAN results from 2014, we can see that what's been highlighted in the red is the children that are at or below the national standard for reading and writing. So when we look at the summary in reading, the children that are struggling, 16.8% of them in Year 3 are struggling with their reading, and 15.4 are struggling with their writing. Now, what happens as a result of these NAPLAN results is that schools, if they haven't already, they will start helping the child. They will start putting them into smaller groups and remediating them. So that's a good idea, because we don't want kids to be falling behind. Oh, and I guess why do they fall behind? It could be, there are a few reasons. The Year 3 NAPLAN results are always very interesting. I started Tom at school when he was 4.5 because the preschool told me he was ready. So I sent him. Some kids start school when they're 6. So we've got a huge age discrepancy when they even start school, which makes it really difficult for the kindy teacher. So, because of the age range, that might be why this happens. Or it could be that perhaps kids have different rates of development. We all hear the difference about girls and boys and so on, so some kids develop earlier than others in some areas. So maybe that explains that. And possibly the third thing that explains that is the fact that at the end of the day, people have different levels of ability. So then we go to the Year 5 NAPLAN results. Now these results, by the way, are provincial New South Wales. Up here are the metropolitan kids and here are the provincial kids. And provincial is classified as kids from the country in country locations like Port Macquarie. They're not the remote kids. The remote kids are in a different category. So when we look at these figures, are they any better? Reading, we've now got 20% of the kids that are struggling with their reading. And so we say to ourselves, the writing has also increased. So whatever has been happening at school in relation to helping kids, is it working? Okay, so we can see that in Year 5, the figures have increased, even though it's quite likely that the school has started to put remediation in place, and usually parents have put things in place as well. Now, my story, Tom started school when he was 4.5, as I said. In kindy, there were no problems. But in year 1, he started to strike problems. He was struggling with his reading. He struggled with his writing. And so I said to the school, and he was at a very good school, I said to the school, maybe we should repeat him, because he was only 4.5. He's only 5.5 now. Maybe he needs to, repeat year 1. The school were not keen on doing that because there's generally a policy of not repeating children. So I lobbied hard and I said, no, I think you should repeat him. So the school counsellor got involved and assessed Tom and said that he was within the range for year 1. And I thought to myself, well, heck, he's struggling a lot. So I went and got an independent report from Macquarie University. And the psychologists at Macquarie University indicated that he was struggling and was quite immature for year 1, and so maybe it would be a good idea to repeat him. So I took that report to school and they said, all right, based on what you've done, we'll repeat him. So Tom repeated year 1 and I thought, good, the problem will be solved. Great. In year 1, the school put him into remedial classes where he was going to see the remedial teacher actually it was one-on-one 5 days a week because of his poor reading. At home, I was still doing reading with him, and when we got into year 2, I thought, good, everything's chugging right along. But when I went to the parent-teacher interview, imagine how surprised I was when the teacher who was new at the school suggested I repeat Tom in year 2. I thought to myself, crikey, this kid will be 25 before he finishes year 12 if we're going to do 2 years for every one. So with that, I thought, right, something's not working. So I've got to search and I've got to find out what I can do with this kid. So I rang Spelled and I got referred to a specialist dyslexia person who worked with Tom for 12 months. Every week he went once a week for an hour to see this lady, and after 12 months there had been no change in his reading and writing. So now we're in year 3. He was functionally illiterate. He could not read or write to save his life. And I thought, crikey, what am I going to do? We tried the glasses, we tried the hearing, did all of the things that I was supposed to have done. And my mother-in-law, who we just set up with Foxtel, she just moved into retirement village, my mother-in-law, and she was watching Foxtel, and she saw someone being interviewed from America talking about dyslexia. So she rang me up and she said, do you think Tom's dyslexic? I said, no, why would I think that? Nobody's ever mentioned that word to me. Why would I think Tom's dyslexic? She said, oh, his uncle is. What? That's news to me. Okay, so I thought, armed with this information, let's get him checked. Let's get him tested. So I took him to another psychologist. Can you assess him for dyslexia? Yes, no problem, Mrs. Mullally. So, get a nice report. I'm looking at the report. No mention of dyslexia. So I rang them up and I said, you haven't tested him for dyslexia here, apparently. I've asked you to do that because I want to know if he's dyslexic. Well, Mrs. Mullally, we can't put it in the report because it's not recognised in Australia, but we can tell you he is dyslexic. He has a specific learning difficulty. Great. How am I going to specifically help him? We don't know. You've just got to keep doing what you're doing. And I'm thinking, well, doing what we're doing wasn't helping. He was still not able to read and write. This is the year 9 NAPLAN results. And as you can see, the figures are getting higher for reading and higher for writing. Year 9, the kids are in high school. There is very little remedial help for those kids. The reason that year 9 is the crucial year, and some of you might know this, but the reason that year 9 is the crucial year is because the OECD nations, and the OECD stands for the Organisation for Economic Development, the OECD want all first world countries, and Australia is one of them, to submit their literacy, numeracy statistics of their 15-year-olds. And so our 15-year-olds, who are the Year 9s, their results get sent to PISA, and PISA stands for the Performance of International Student Achievement. So our 15-year-old kids, our Year 9 kids, these figures are the ones that go over and get collated, and they do it because they want to make sure that the first world countries are maintaining their standards of literacy and numeracy. Because if we don't, and if other first world countries don't, how are we going to be able to economically support the third world countries? That's the problem. So the PISA collate the figures and rank us. And by the way, the last PISA report that came out was in 2014, and it's actually of the 2012 figures. Right, so the last figures, the 2012 15-year-olds, the Year 9s, we were ranked 13th in reading, and we were tied with New Zealand. So we're doing better than the people in the UK, and we're doing better than the kids in the USA, but we're not doing better than China, we're not doing better than Korea, or Japan, or Canada. So we're ranked 13th with our reading. Okay, our writing actually doesn't get collated. So PISA collate reading, maths, and science. All right, so that's why we do it, and that's why the Year 9 NAPLAN is so important. And what happens is the NAPLAN, or the basic skills, has been around for 13 years now, and that's because of this. And what the Australian government has done is they have used, quite rightly, the NAPLAN to plan, to train teachers, to see where, you know, kids are starting to fall behind and so on. So it's actually a pretty good system, but I'm just letting you know that that's why we essentially do it. So in the Year 9s, 28.5% are struggling to achieve the national minimum standard in reading and 52% in writing. And the Australian Bureau of Statistics, by the way, say that something like 1 in 5 kids is going to struggle to get employed. And that's why. Because they don't have the literacy and numeracy skills to be able to get employment. So that's a graph of the trajectory, okay? So in the Year 9, the reading is not as bad as the writing. So why is it kids struggle with reading and writing? Well, yes, you've got some that are dyslexic. Yes, clearly. So I'm going to talk to you about what makes up a learning difficulty, like dyslexia, when does it start, why it starts, and how you can help your child. Because in the PISA report it says that one of the biggest indicators of success for children is parental involvement. If parents have an optimistic view of education, the children normally do better. And I found that incredibly interesting because as a parent, I was leaving it to the teachers. I was thinking the teachers were going to sit, that's what they do, isn't it? I'm not a teacher. But I knew that I was getting involved, and I knew that unless I helped Tom and supported the teachers, then I didn't know where we were going to be. So, what makes up a learning difficulty? Well, essentially, there are 2 main ways that people process information or think. One way is that people do visual thinking. Visual thinking is when we think in pictures, like that. The other way that people think is to do verbal thinking. And verbal thinking is when we think with words in our head. Now, I am a verbal thinker. As soon as I open my eyes in the morning, I start talking to myself in my head. And verbal thinking, we do 5 words per second. Okay? Picture thinkers think 30 pictures per second. So they think very quickly. I can do picture thinking. Having said that, I can do picture thinking. If you guys said to me, oh yes, I'm late today because I had to get around the roadworks there on Hastings Street. I know what you mean. I've got a picture of that in my head because, yeah, I got caught there the other day. So if I have seen something, I have it recorded in my picture memory. if I haven't seen it, I can't imagine it. But dyslexics can, because they prefer to think with pictures. That's what they do all the time. And what they also do is they think about 3 parts to a symbol or a word. So when we think about 3 parts to a symbol or a word, we have what it looks like, and I'll just do this little example on the whiteboard. Okay, so if I do this symbol here, it's 3 lines, 2 horizontal ones and 1 diagonal line. So that's what it looks like. What it sounds like is Z, and what it means Z, okay? If we think about this one here, that's also 3 lines. They're put together differently. It looks like 3 lines. The name of it is 4. And even if we do this one, looks like an S. But if I put a line through it, it changes it to become a symbol for a dollar. So it's a dollar, and it means a value of money. So, what makes up the learning difficulty? People who are dyslexic have a strong visual thinking style. Now, what I should say here as well is that when kids are little, like those guys over there, they think with pictures. They do. If you say to them, go and put your pyjamas on, they've got a picture in their head of their pyjamas, they know where they are, they go to their room and they go and put them on. When kids start going to school, they start learning symbols and letters, numbers, that sort of thing. So for kids who are, because all kids are picture thinkers to start off with, when they start in kindy or in preschool, they start learning how to work the symbols, what the name of them is, what the sound is that they represent. But roughly 10% of the kids don't make the transition in kindy or in year 1 or in year 2. So by the time they get to year 3, they are not processing sound, they are visual thinkers. They are processing pictures in their head. So for them, the sound that the letter represents is not what they do in their head. Does that make sense? So what they start to do, when we think about it, you know, like I said, you know, these kids over here, if you said go and put your pyjamas on, they would do it because they know what pyjamas are. Everything in a little kid's life is 3-dimensional. When they go to school, they start getting introduced to the 2-dimensional. This is a 3-dimensional object. It's on my arm, it's a watch. But if I take it off my arm, I haven't changed the identity of this thing. It's still a watch. If I turn it inside out, I still haven't changed the identity. It is still a watch. But when kids go to school and they start learning letters and what the letters represent, and pretty much these days at school, kids learn the sounds that they represent. They don't even learn their names a lot of the time, the names of the letters. When they get to 2-dimensional objects, if a child is trying to make sense of the meaning of this, and they can't because they don't process sound, they will move it. And that's where the general understanding is that dyslexics make letters and words move. But they don't. They are trying to find the meaning of the letter or the word. So when they go to school and they see a letter like D and they go D, O, G, dog, they get a visual representation of what a dog is, a 4-legged animal with a waggy tail. So that's not really a problem because they can process the meaning of that word. When it comes to words like the and was, they struggle, they become confused because their mind or their picture thinking doesn't have a meaning for that word. They become confused and they change it because their mind is searching for the meaning of the word. So a typical one that I see a lot is they change the word was to saw. Yeah, why? Because they can get a visual of saw. So what they do, and this is what Rex down at the reception desk said, is dyslexia when they switch letters around. Yes, it is. Why? They're not aware they're doing it, but they are doing it because they are searching for the meaning of the word. That's what their processing is doing, searching for the meaning of the word. So typically with the word was, they'll switch it around to be saw, because they can get a visual representation for that, right? But then what happens is that's not what's actually on the page, and their comprehension is all up the putty. The third thing that makes up the learning difficulty is the pressure and the anxiety that leads to the confusion. Now, you saw the photo of my family. There was Tom in year 1 the first time round. And the teacher said to me, Mrs. Mullally, he doesn't know any of his sight words. In fact, he doesn't know any of the words in his books. He labours over them all. Can you make up some flashcards? Yes, I can do that. I'll make up flashcards. So I made up hundreds of flashcards. And I had them in the car because it was a half-hour trip to school and a half-hour trip home. So every day I would grab these flashcards, and the 3 kids were sitting in the back. There was Tom in the middle, Michaela in a car seat, and Tina in her car seat. So there were the 3 kids in the back, and I've got the flashcards and the steering wheel. I'm driving to school. I would hold one up and I'd say, what's that word, Tom? No response, so I'd look at it and I'd just say it. Okay, what's that word, Tom? No response, I'd look at it and say it. What's that word, Tom? I'd say it. For 3 months, on the way to school and on the way home, as well as him going to remedial classes and everything else that we were doing, trying to help this kid. One day, I'm driving along and I'm a bit over it, so I just pick up the flashcard and I say, what's this? Duck. Man, we've had a breakthrough. I was so excited. I was punching the air. Good job, Tom. Well done, well done. Mum, it wasn't me. What do you mean it wasn't you? It wasn't me that said duck. Who could it be? He's got a 4-year-old sister sitting in her car seat playing with her teddy, and he's got the other sister who's 2. Who could possibly have said the word duck? Michaela said it, says Tom. What? So I drop him off at school, and I think to myself, okay, what's going on? So I hold up a flashcard to Michaela, the 4-year-old, and I said, Michaela, do you know what that word is? She looked at it and said, the. That was a lucky guess. Picked up another one. Do you know this word, Michaela? And? Alrighty. What about this one? Because. Crikey, what's going on here? I didn't know. What was going on when I was holding up the cards for Tom and saying, what's this word, Tom? I was putting that boy under a huge amount of pressure to have the answer. I didn't put Michaela under any pressure. She would be looking out the window of the car, playing with her teddy. Never was she under pressure to know the answer. But when given the opportunity of saying the answer, she just came out with it all. Why? She is a picture thinker too. But what she did, without the pressure, she recorded the pattern of letters in her picture memory with the sound that I said, and just when asked, said the word. So when she went to school, and she had just turned 5, she's a January kid, and she started learning phonics. She actually started learning phonics before that in preschool, but when she started learning phonics, she thought that was great. Because man, now I can work out the big words. So imagine my surprise when there's Tom repeating year 1, actually year 2, he's in year 2 now, and there's Michaela in kindergarten, and the teacher rings me up and says, Mrs. Mullally, we have a problem with Michaela. What could the problem be with Michaela? She's reading Harry Potter. What's the problem there? She's far too advanced for kindergarten. So we had other issues there because she was reading books that were designed for year 6 kids when she was in kindy. And boy, did that add to the dynamic of the family. Wow, aren't I having fun? So they are the 3 things that make up the learning difficulty. And if we can remove one of those things, such as the pressure and the anxiety that they're feeling, then they can start learning. When does a learning difficulty start? Well, you know, they start going to school and they're picture thinkers, aren't they? They think with pictures. So it can start in foundation year, which is kindy, because those kids these days, I mean, Tom's 23 now, but those kids these days are under a lot of pressure because they have to know stuff fast. And by the end of year 2, if they are dominant with their visual thinking, it's really hard to try and do anything else with them. So most schools do more phonics-based programs, which really might not be helping. Why does it start? Well, they're dominant visual thinkers. They like to do the picture thinking. I'm a word thinker. I like to do word thinking. What do I do when I'm under pressure? I word think faster. I talk to myself faster in my head. When they're under pressure, they do more pictures in their head. They don't know how to regulate their pictures. They don't know how to stop them. They don't know how to slow them down. And that's why writing tends to be a problem, because their pictures are going so quickly, they can't get the words down quick enough. I remember, this is sort of going off a bit, but I remember Tom in year 1, the second time round, had to do it was the beginning of the school year. He had to write, what'd you do in the school holidays? He wrote, in the school holidays, we'd been to the circus and we'd been to the zoo. So he starts writing about going to the circus. In the school holidays, we went to the circus. And as his pictures of the circus were going, the pictures of the zoo got mixed in. So his pictures were going faster, his sentences became shorter until there was one word, full stop, one word, full stop, one word, full stop. And the zoo and the circus were all in together. Of course, he didn't do well in this writing task, especially since he was in year 1 the second time round. He should have known how to do this. So he gets in the car. He says, Mum, I did this really good thing on writing, and look what happened. And I looked at it, and there was red everywhere. I said, well, what do you think? He said, Mum, it was a really good story. I said, let me tell you what you've written. So I started reading what the words were on the page. And he started crying because, Mum, no, that's not what I wrote. He thought he was writing his pictures, but what was coming out was just one word, full stop, one word, full stop, because his pictures were going so fast. So he didn't know how to regulate his pictures, and he was feeling pressure and confusion. So there's little Tyson, who's feeling the pressure, and he's confused. And did he want to do anything? Not really. How can we motivate kids? What motivates kids? Well, what motivates kids is things that are interesting to them. And that's why technology at the moment, it's interesting for kids. It's novel or new. So when they learn about a new Minecraft game or do something else, they have fun with it. Sometimes kids are motivated when they compete with themselves or with other kids. But sometimes that doesn't really work, especially depending on your child. And some kids are motivated by a sense of urgency. Oh, I've got to do that project by tomorrow. I better get on with it now. And of course, when things are fun or entertaining, they are motivated. So what we've got to do with motivating kids and getting them on track with reading. If you've got a child who's in year 4 or 5 or even year 3 and they are struggling with their reading and they have had lots of instruction from school that is phonics-based instruction, which is a really fantastic way of teaching kids to read. I'm not a phonics knocker because I know Michaela and Tina thrived with phonics. It works for 90% of the kids. But if you've got one of the 10%, what are you going to do? Are you going to keep doing the same thing over and over again? What does that do to their self-esteem? I know Tom was dragging his around in the gutter because he felt tragic. So what we've got to do is have something different. It's called a pattern interrupt. We've got to interrupt the pattern of doing the same thing that doesn't have success. Schools can't do this because they have got 25 or 30 kids in the class. The one teacher can't do it for one child. Yes, there's remedial classes, but remedial just means it's the same thing in a smaller group a lot of the time. So, what do you want as parents potentially you're here, so you might think you've got a dyslexic child. Where do you see that child being in 5 or 10 years? What future do you want for them? Dyslexia can be managed, and I've proved it time and time again in my clinical practice and with my son. Parents can take action. This was an article that was in the Daily Telegraph, not last Friday, but the Friday before, and it was about mums taking action. And it's about this mum who is a teacher who's taking action with her son and taking matters into her hands. The teachers can't do it, the schools can't do it all. And at the end of the day, we're the ones with the children that need to be literate and numerate to get employment. In the article, it says that dyslexia is dubbed the sleeping giant of learning difficulties in Australian classrooms, and it is, because it's not recognised. They'll talk about auditory processing disorder, and they've told me that Tom has central auditory processing disorder, and Tom has a poor working memory and a poor short-term memory. I mean, there are so many labels, nobody calls it dyslexia. And the ABS talks about how 1 in 2 students don't have the literacy standards to meet the demands of the workplace. So when is the right time? Well, I'm going to show you this little video about Louis. So whenever you're ready, are you ready?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Whenever you're ready, off you go.
My name's Lewis. I'm 67 years old and run my own disability taxi service. I come from Maul in 1956 and educated in various schools, and my reading wasn't very good. When I open the letterbox and something comes, I've always opened the letter and never been able to read it, or I've been running my taxi service for 30 years. I decided to get help with my reading. And I tend to never let it hold me back, but I'm very sure it did various times. I just got by with people helping me and having to trust a lot of people that what they were writing was right. Certainly it would have been a lot better if I had to learn to read. Because of modern technology, I wanted to go one more stage in my life, and at 67 I've decided I was introduced to dyslexia course, and I inquired about it, and it's all happening. And it's actually enjoying learning. For the first time is that I sat down and listened to somebody that's teaching me. I did the course 3 months ago. I found that eager to keep on learning to read, practice makes perfect. I went to register a new car for a taxi only on Friday, and with a little bit of backup from the lady behind the desk, practically filled in for the first time in 30 years the transfer of RTA from one car to another, the plates. And honestly say, after doing that, I walked out and realised, geez, I just done that. I have had different conversations with people since taking up the course. One is the lady next door, and she said, good on you, Louis, 1 foot in the grave and you want to learn to read. Certainly, I think I have come across 1 or 2 people. Everybody that, customers, friends, relations, that I've told them what I've done, has all thought that's a great thing. It didn't matter, no one really worried about my age. And that if anyone worries about, doesn't matter how old you are, you're always learning. So, you know, if you're not learning about one thing, you're learning about another, and I've decided to learn to read.
Louis decided to work with me because he's 67 and he wanted to retire at 70. And he wanted to hitch up, he bought a Jayco pop-up van, wanted to hitch it up to his brand new Toyota Hilux ute and take off. But without being able to read and feel confident about the signs or reading maps or reading anything, he thought, man, how am I going to do this? He's had to trust a lot of people, as he said, in his life. He's had to trust other people to read for him and to fill out paperwork. And what the straw that broke the camel's back was we got this brand new Toyota ute and he wanted to program the GPS in it, but he couldn't do it. So he said to his son, can you program the GPS? His son said, hang on. So he got the instruction manual out of the glove box, brand new car this is, out of the glove box. Oh, Dad, they said it's on page 46. This book doesn't have a page 46. Put it back in the glove box. So Louis, who was scheduled to have his first service, went to Toyota and said, hey, listen, you've ripped me off. This manual here doesn't have page 46. How do you want me to program my GPS? The guy gets the manual out. There's page 46 there. His son let him down. So Louis was sick of it. He wanted to be able to do it for himself, so it's never too late. How you can help your child? Well, my colleague Gail has come along on this trip with us. She does assessments. I took Tom to 2 different psychologists. One was Macquarie University and the other one was a private psychologist for assessing. Neither of them did the dyslexic screening test, which determines yes or no. Are you dyslexic? Yes or no. They did IQ testing. They did testing about seeing what level he was at, but they didn't test to see if he was dyslexic. I do face-to-face courses, and that's what Louis did with me. And I go to people's homes and I work with them, or they come to my office in Crow's Nest and I work with them. Or what I'm really excited about and what I'm doing on this trip is launching my online courses, because I want parents to be able to help their child at home without the cost of a face-to-face program. It's step-by-step weekly lessons. There are 10 lessons for reading. It takes about an hour a week, right? And then you just keep supporting, keep doing the work. I give you coaching skills, how you can help your child, how you can help them learn how they need to self-regulate. You do it in your own home, and you do it when it works in with your commitments. There's a list like this at the back tables, and this is what it covers in the curriculum. So how do we measure success? Okay, these are all people I worked with about 10 years ago. We have Hayden. Hayden was an attitudinal teenager that I worked with when he was 14. He's now 24, and would you believe it, he's a primary school teacher. Then we have Beck. I worked with Beck when she was 23. She had no self-esteem. She could not hold a job for more than 3 months. Why? 3 months was the probationary period. She couldn't even work in an ice cream shop doing the the curves of the ice cream, she got sacked from that. She had never held, at 23, she'd never held a job for longer than 3 months. She's now a budding actress and she's held the same job for 8 years. Then we have young James. And here's young James when he's 9 years old. And there's James now studying psychology at university. Because of all his experience, he wanted to be able to help other people. And then we have young Mitchell. And Mitchell was a little 8-year-old. And you know what? Mitchell is part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. His mum contacted me in January this year and said, just letting you know, he's finished his HSC. And Mitchell, when he came to work with me at this age, Kate, his mum, said, I'm worried he's going to commit suicide because he's threatened it a couple of times. I thought, crikey, no pressure, Marianne. But there he is today, finished his HSC, and they're a cock-a-hoop because we did things a little differently.
My name's Thomas and I'm 8 years old.
I'm Glenn, I'm Thomas's dad. I didn't like to write or spell things. I knew I had a weakness and I avoided it as best I could from doing it. I think I've been ready for a while and just didn't know that what to do or that what I had. I thought how I handled spelling and the written word was normal. I thought everybody thought the same. Being able to step into somebody else's mind and see how they think isn't a possibility, so I thought everybody thought like I did and saw pictures and what have you. But yeah, I really thought it was one lesson I missed at school was how to spell, whereas maths was easy. They gave you a set of rules and if you worked with those rules you got to the right answer, but in spelling I couldn't. There was no rules for me to work with.
When I didn't have this program, I didn't want to read at all, not a single letter. I didn't feel good.
No. Tom has not only dyslexia, but Tom's been diagnosed with ASD1, which in old language is called Asperger's. If Tom had not done the program, life at home would not be happy. Life at home would be very stressful. Life at home would be
Tantrums.
We would be dealing with tantrums and meltdowns and physical damage to the house.
What was the school doing?
Nothing. Because I hadn't asked them or advised them that they needed to do things. They just thought that he was mucking up. They weren't doing anything.
So they hadn't identified that there was
Look, they thought there was nothing wrong. They thought he was just being a kid. They thought he was just being a boy.
They held me back from promotions and doing different challenges. But yeah, it became life and I thought that was normal.
You've got to get someone suspected of having something assessed or diagnosed so you can get the right treatment and the right program for that person.
I think in pictures. I'm not alone and it's creating pictures for the words that I had trouble with and identifying them, identifying that what unsettled me or unfocused me. I'll catch myself, I'm refocusing. Or I could become disorientated. I need to step back, take a deep breath, and start again.
His reading has improved immeasurably. His handwriting is improving exponentially.
He wants to read.
Tom wants to write, Tom wants to read, Tom wants to learn. He is learning to focus himself. He is willing to focus himself.
When I'm reading my Minecraft book and I'm thirsty to grab a glass of milk, I walk with the book in my hand and read it. And I read pieces while I'm getting my milk because I leave it open on the bench.
This year the school has been very helpful in giving us the style of teacher Tom needed, giving Tom the style of class that he needed, and being open to using the right trigger words. The teacher uses the right trigger words for Tom. She tells him to use his tools. She has a chart for his energy levels up in the classroom so he can see. She has visual reminders of what's going to happen through the day and what's happening through the week up for Tom to see. She liaises with me a lot. We even SMS each other. We liaise an awful lot and talk, and I help in the classroom with reading. I help all the kids.
Right.
But it's also a way of me keeping an eye on how Tom's reading is going at school, not just at home. It's fascinating, the process of watching it. It's like watching them unlock. It is like watching them. Yeah, it is like watching them unlock. They are all tied up and they can't do it. The program teaches them to unlock their minds and get their brains working the way they need to work their brains to read. And that it's not saying the brain's not working well, it's just got to work a different way to read. And it's amazing, it's an amazing process to watch.
I suggest that they look into it and try it.
If you're going to do a program, just try out reading. The words aren't really moving. It's just your mind messing with you.
Yep, out of the mouths of babes. So success is what you make it. Parents can get involved. Parents can make a difference to these kids. Don't leave it up to the schools. Don't leave it up to the teachers, because a lot of the time they don't necessarily know. And Gail will be speaking to you in a moment from the teacher's perspective. And then Tom will be speaking to you because he's the dyslexic. So thanks very much for coming. That's it from me.
Please put your hands together for Mary Ann.